Good evening. A warm welcome to all the participants. My name is Shivaram. I'm going to host this special AAF Knowledge Series, a new initiative from PMS Bazaar and MK Investment Managers. This is the first episode of this special AAF series. We are joined by MK Investment Manager, who is part of MK Global, which is a 25-year-old strong group who are going to present a topic today, Spotting Emerging Stars the MK Way. After a successful launch of three series in this same topic, they have delivered 125% return in all this three series earlier. Now they are going to launch the series 4. To present the Spotting Emerging Stars, we are joined by two fund managers. Let me take the privilege of introducing them. Mr. Sachin Shah, who has got about 20 years of equity experience in research, who has realized and developed a proprietary module to evaluate and compare stocks and the various key aspects for desirable outcome of selection of stocks. We are also joined by Mr. Kashyap Javeri, who brings in about 16 years of experience with in-depth knowledge in manufacturing and service sectors. Along with the banking sector, he has got exposure. After the presentation, the forum will be open for the Q&A, and the fund managers will answer for any queries you may have. They will any query which is unanswered will be sent to the AMC for a suitable reply. AF category, it is growing rapidly and getting investors' attention nowadays, and it has got some very clear advantages over traditional investments like mutual funds, or for that matter, even PMSs. In that way, the fund manager has got a very clear mandate in front of him, and he has got a leap of time which is very clear to him to play his underlying theme. As the name suggests, the emerging star identifies stocks at the cusp of growth, which is poised for a huge and profitable returns, and travel with the stock to get outlandish returns. To quote an example, in the API space, everyone knows a company named Divi's Lab, and they are number one, and they are a dominating player. And in the space, MK has identified names like Laurus Lab, which was in the budding stage, which has become a multi-bagger. Now I hand over the stage to both the fund managers, Mr. Kashyap and Sachin, to make the presentation. After the session, we will have a Q&A, and as I told you earlier, and most of the questions, as much as possible, we will cover in this program, and the questions which are not answered, we will definitely get back to you by sending an email to the AMC and with a suitable answer. Over to you, Mr. Sachin and Kashyap.
Thank you, Mr. Shivaram. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. It's indeed a pleasure and privilege to be with all of you. Thank you. Once again, thank you, PMS Bazaar, for having us for this exclusive webinar. So actually, in the next 45 to 50 minutes, we will walk you, along with my colleague, Mr. Kashyap Javeri, we will walk you through the presentation, briefly touching about our investment philosophy. We will talk about the ideation process in terms of the origination of ideas, how that has occurred at our end. And then we will also talk about, which is actually very important, that how these ideas, how these ideations are actually screened into our framework, which really gives us a lot of confidence and conviction to invest into these businesses, to own these businesses through the thick and thin of times, through each and every ups and downs. And then also think of figuring out when do we actually exit some of these businesses, right? So we have a lot of examples that we have a part of our presentation. I'm sure It will be very interesting for all of you. So we will now start with the formal presentation. Kashyap, I hope the screen is visible. Great. Okay. So this is what I was talking about in terms of our philosophy. So to get the base right, it's very important to be very clear that what are we trying to achieve. So we are very clear that we are here only to do long-term investing. And when we say long-term investing, we are very clear that we want to invest with a perspective to own businesses for at least 3 to 5 years, longer the better. And the whole idea is that the fun of investing in equities is all about the game of compounding. As Albert Einstein once mentioned, that the eighth wonder of the world is all about compounding. And we strongly believe that the whole idea of investing in equities has to be the game of compounding. And because we would like that to happen, we need to own businesses for a longer period of time. And for us to own businesses for a longer period of time, it's also very important that we build a lot of conviction, and we also have a lot of patience once we have done our own research, once we've done our own homework. These are very, very important things. And another very important thing, what Mr. Warren Buffett says, rule number 1, do not lose money. Rule number 2, do not forget rule number 1, which is where we talk about avoiding mistakes. So that is our very, very clear focus. That's what our philosophy is all about when it comes to investing. And keeping this in the background, we then start thinking about which are the investment ideas or investment themes that we could be actually participating in it. Once we have that idea, then we try to boil that down to few companies. Once we have some few names, then we try to process them into our screeners, which is our framework, which is our investment framework. And as we walk through this presentation, you will get a more sense of what I'm talking about. So let me start with a few examples. Mr. Shivaram just mentioned about our 3 investments, which is Divi's Lab, Laurus Labs, and Suven Pharma. So actually, Divi's Lab has been an investment for us for almost now 7+ years. We've been owning this business for the last 7 years. It has been a great compounder for us for all these years. Particularly, I think in the last 1 year, it has been even better. But the important thing is that about 3 years back, so Divi's Lab has been a part of our large cap, multi-cap portfolios. But say around 3 years back, when we launched our first small cap fund, the AIF fund, and when we were thinking about which investments we need to make, which themes we need to make. So, it sometimes, as I always say, that investing is actually more about common sense than anything else. And that's where we are talking about it. Origination of ideas is actually about looking at the obvious. So within our portfolio of stocks, within our existing portfolio of stocks at that point in time, say 3 years back, Divi's was one of the better performing businesses. And this was contrary to a lot of pharma companies. Right. So when we looked at Divi's more closely, obviously we said that the API business and the custom synthesis businesses were doing quite well. So we said, can we look at a few more companies in a similar space, because certain characteristics that Divi's have, if some of the other companies can actually also work on them, they can actually do much better. And that's where we identified Laurus Labs and Suven Pharma both. Then how did we screen those ideas? How did we actually put them in our framework and they pass through those screeners? We will talk about that in the next few slides. The other very important, very interesting idea that we actually invested was Tata Elxsi. And this thought came from, when we looked at the consumer markets, particularly say in the auto segment, we all know the kind of the dashboard transformation that all our cars have gone through. It's been a complete change, right? What a dashboard used to be a very mechanical thing. Now it's 100% digital. Not only that, the cars are becoming more and more connected, more and more autonomous. And that is where we realize that compared to a typical IT services company, this job has to be done by companies which are much more specialized into IT embedded services. And within that space, clearly Tata Elxsi has been there for many, many years. Then the other very important thing is when we looked at, even before COVID, we already had seen the emergence of the OTT platforms. The Netflix and the Amazons have already become a part of our lifestyle. So that was another very big change in terms of the consumer preferences. And again, this is the whole delivery of the media became very digital. And that is again where companies like Tata Elxsi can play a very important role. So this is how we identified Tata Elxsi. I'm sure Kashyap can also talk about a couple of more companies. Kashyap? Kashyap, you're on mute.
Sorry. What was also visible over last few years is that as an average Indian consumer became younger, on an average, let's say about anywhere between about 28 to about 35 odd years, and there was an expansion of his own wallet, in terms of income growth. This consumer, what we believed was, he was not going to spend more and more money on probably, buying toothpaste or buying soaps or shampoos or creams. He was going to, spend money on things which add value to his own lifestyle, where, Sachin also spoke about, how we are consuming the OTT platform. An average Indian consumer is now today ready to also spend a lot of money on the quality of healthcare, which would include both insurance as well as buying the best of the healthcare for his own family. And where we thought, Narayana Healthcare, which is one of the cost competitive delivery of the best of the healthcare in this country, could fit in. What we also saw is that, in terms of healthcare, as well as, probably if you look at even CRAMS, the companies are changing their own preferences by, delivering, solutions to the customers, which are more efficient in nature. Even in B2B segment, which is, for example, where we thought Navin Florin fits in, where, in coming slides, we'll also develop on the fact that, how fluorination within the whole chemistry space and the fact that India is, one of the pioneers, in that chemistry, how it's changing the landscape of, what consumer is consuming in terms of both, his own healthcare, as well as in terms of the agrochemical segment, which eventually also gets into a consumer preferences over a period of time.
Right. Couple of more ideas from my side. So almost for a decade, we've been reading into newspapers that the foreign equity investors, particularly the large private equity players, the large sovereign wealth funds like the GICs of the world, the Temasecs of the world, they have been investing very significantly in the commercial real estate. And that's where we said that if we have to invest in real estate, can we look at some listed play in the commercial real estate? Because there is a method in this madness. There is some very decent logic that this large foreign equity players or foreign sovereign wealth companies are actually investing there. And that's when we identified Nesco almost a decade back. And we even today continue to own this business. More over that, or the more detailed discussion on it in the next few slides. The other very interesting cue that we get actually is when we see the IPOs coming from the new business models. Like, for example, I distinctly remember the way back in the year 2009, when Mahindra Holidays came up with their IPO, it was a very unconventional business model when it came to the hotel industry or the hospitality industry. A very conventional hospitality business model or for a hotel is where they do a very large capex and then they wait for their inventory to get occupied. They wait for higher occupancies. They wait for a demand supply mismatch for higher ARRs, which is the room rates. And then obviously there's a lot of cyclicality in that business. But when Club Mahindra came up with an IPO, it was very evident that the business model is very different, where they don't have any capex on their books, or large part of their capex was getting funded through the customers. So that was a very new business model. So although we would have not invested at that point in time in 2009 for multiple reasons, but that always was on our radar because that was an interesting business model, where we felt it was very good for the equity shareholders. So at an opportune time, we would look at investing. Another example is again VRL Logistics, again a company which was, the logistics as an industry is highly fragmented. and which is where VRL as a company actually had created a business model which was very, very technology savvy, which was very, very disciplined in terms of delivery to the customers. So that was another business model that was always on our radar, and at an opportune time we would have invested in that business. Another very good example is, say, Zomato. Like today, Zomato has disrupted the way the food delivery, or the way people eat, the eating habits of people going out and eating and now getting the food at their doorstep. I think it's an amazing disruption that they have done. They actually identified a big problem that a lot of people had, and then they have given a great solution. So this is also one business which will always be on our radar. Yeah, Kashyap.
Yeah. And lastly, it also boils down to the fact that, when you run a lot of screeners, a lot of ideas do, sort of tumble out of, if I were to use that word actually, a lot of ideas actually tumble out of those screeners. So, clearly what we also look at is that, is the company reinvesting in its own business in a big way or not? Doesn't matter to us whether, that utilization is coming today, yesterday, tomorrow. The fact that the company is reinvesting a lot of money into its own business, and that reinvestment is happening from the internal cash flows, because, I mean, as the quote goes, the revenue is, vanity, but the cash flow is the king, right? It's more sanity that it provides to the business, that you look for. So we also look for companies which are reinvesting in their own business, and primarily if it's happening in the big way. And you need to have, probably nerves of steel, or let's say, patience to wait out of for that period where you do believe that, there will be definitely a ripe time for this asset sweating. And, whenever that happens, obviously, the stock will churn out, the returns, as and when that happens. And like Sachin has highlighted earlier, we are looking at compounding over here, and not, sort of instant gratification, in terms of our returns. So, whenever that asset sweating happens, usually is compounding, it's actually multifold, as and when that happens. And it could happen, in fact, in shorter period of times also.
Right, Kashyap, thanks. So, this is how we have, some of this thought process is how we originate our ideas, or the ideation process as we all talk about. But, this is just the beginning. Actually, the more important ideas are there all around. But the important thing is, how do we screen these ideas, right? How do we take them to a logical conclusion with a lot of conviction? So that is where we have created our own frameworks. And, one of our proprietary module, which has really steadied us very, very strongly all in the last 10 years, I would say, at least in the entire decade, has been this equal framework. And this is a proprietary module at MK. In our entire framework, one of the most important part is the management. We strongly believe that management quality is what makes or breaks the businesses. In fact, when I'm sitting with Kashyap and my other team members, we are always discussing that if we evaluate our investments, the successful investments and not so successful investments, the big difference is the management. It's all in the hands of the management, because the opportunity is there with the business opportunity is there with a lot of companies within the same sector, but only a few of them are able to capitalize on that. And that is where where we have a very high focus on management. And, when we talk about equal, we have, we try to look at things from a perspective that how do we evaluate management? Because management quality is actually a very subjective thing. Like I and Kashyap, both of us would go and meet a management, and the management will talk everything that is music to our ears. And, after coming out, I will say, oh, wow, this is a great management. They have great ideas. They are going to achieve all of this. And Kashyap will say, no, this is all bullshit. They are just bluffing. Look at the data, right? And then I was like, yeah, you're right. The data is saying something else. So the whole point is that we would like to evaluate management. We would hear them out, but it's also important to figure out, are they really walking the talk, right? So we said, let's evaluate on some of the large parameters, like, is there a management integrity? How capable they are? How have they done wealth distribution to the minority shareholders? What has been their investor communication frequency and consistency and liquidity? right? These are some very important parameters that we are focused about. I will share one more slide with you where I will say that you can see that how we evaluate the management integrity, because here we are trying to find directionally what is the intent of the management. We all have to understand one thing, that investing is a game of probability. So we are here trying to reduce our probability of going wrong. The very first time when I talked about the philosophy, I spoke about avoiding mistakes. I spoke about rule number 1 of Warren Buffett: do not lose money, and rule number 2, do not forget rule number 1. So this entire module is based on that thought process. So what we said is, can we look at promoter holding, higher the promoter holding, higher the skin in the game, lower the probability that the promoters will do something very silly. I distinctly remember there were so many companies in the year 2000 during the IT heydays, when the IT stocks were going absolutely berserk, and quite a few promoters actually sold out a large part of their shareholding during those boom times. So we are very much focused that the promoter continues to have a decent amount of skin in the game. And we strongly believe, particularly in the mid cap and the small cap stocks, higher the promoter holding, higher the skin in the game, lower the probability that they will do something silly. Has the promoter holding been increased or decreased over the last 2-3 years is also a very important parameter. Equity history dilution, where companies that do not dilute is something what we are very happy about, because if there is too much of frequent dilution or very high dilution, it speaks about 2-3 things. One is that either the business model is very weak, that it doesn't have generate enough amount of internal cash flow. Kashyap just mentioned in our previous example, where we look at companies where are they doing capex from their internal cash flows, or even if they're borrowing, how much is internal cash flow, how much is the borrowing. So that plays a very important role. And if suppose the business model is fairly decent, cash flows are there, but yet the company keeps on diluting equity, that means either then the promoter is doing something silly. Then in either case, we would not like to invest in those companies. How much is the promoter holding pledged? The very infamous case of Satyam has really taught us this lesson, that this is a very important lesson. This is a very important parameter that we need to always be focused about. So companies which have a promoter holding pledged of more than 70%, we generally avoid investing in those companies. Promoter group salary as a percentage of profits. We have seen in few companies where it's a very, very high percentage, more than 20-30% of the profit. We clearly see that as a compromise of the minority shareholders' interest. Auditors, do you have the big four as your auditors? Do you have known auditors, or do you have unknown auditors? So if you have unknown auditors, we do not like that. So we will give 0%. If you have known auditors, we'll probably give 2.5. If you have big four, we'll give you full 5% marks for that. Royalty, in case of multinational companies, historically we've seen that many multinational companies have actually transferred disproportionate share to their parents by way of royalty. That also definitely compromises the minority shareholders' interest. So this is where we this lot of these parameters actually help us understand the management integrity. We also have some parameters which are clear red flags to us. Kashyap, would you like to talk to?
Of course, Sachin spoke about some of the things which help us to make a better investment decision. However, avoiding some of the mistakes do also provide a lot of comfort. On the other side, I admire Sachin for keeping he keeps talking about those 2 rules of Mr. Warren Buffett. And this is rule number 1 that we always stick to in any business where promoter holding is above 70%, which means that the promoter's own stake is on borrowed lifeline, is a clear no for us. Any business which has got debt restructuring more than once in its lifetime, again clearly shows that management has not put enough efforts behind the financial health of this company. A complete no for us. If there are no investor communications, we usually avoid those companies, except for we might make some exceptions on multinational companies. But if there are no great disclosures even in annual reports, which is one of the biggest medium to communicate with shareholders, we usually avoid those companies. Again, with point number 2, combine point number 4. debt equity ratio of more than 2.5x. Clearly, the financial health of the company has not been, taken care of. Again, a complete no-no for us. Any business which has seen a very large acquisition, which takes about 50% of net worth, being invested in an acquisition, again, is a red flag for us, because we have seen in the history of Indian companies, even the best of the brands which are, there in terms of corporate, history, a lot of them have failed in terms of acquisition, because there are a lot of issues which occur once the acquisition happens, in terms of aligning the mentality of the promoters, realigning the workforces, their salary structure, so on and so forth. It's like, a marriage where you have put in a lot of efforts, and any chances of failure, probably, will wipe out about 50% of the net worth of that company. Again, a clear no-no for us. Any company which is investing into non-related businesses, like, Sachin clearly highlighted Satyam, which also invested as a promoter. Promoter of the company also invested in totally non-related business, which was into infrastructure, and we have seen what has happened over a period of time there. So again, a complete no-no for us, in terms of our investment philosophy.
Yeah. So, so this has been one of our very important frameworks, the equal. But over and above that, also, there are a lot of other parameters that we are very much focused about. So one of the very important things is to look at the track record of the businesses, right? And when we look at track record, again, we very clearly say that we will first focus on cash flows, then the balance sheet and the P&L, and exactly in that order. The thought process behind there is that, cash flows don't lie. It's very, very difficult to manipulate cash flows, right? There are a few exceptions, but those are truly outliers. But other than that, cash flows are very difficult to manipulate. Balance sheet is also very important, because every business goes through a good and a bad cycle. How did the business actually hold itself, or how did the management maneuver the business during those bad times, actually gets reflected in the balance sheet, since it's a cumulative of all these years. And then, of course, we also look at the P&L, because P&L is also important, because, of course, it's just for 1 year, but it also tells you the business model. You can also have a comparison with the peer group. What are the inherent strengths of that particular company or product? Is all get reflected in the P&L. So that's very important for us. The other very important thing is scalability. The businesses that we are investing in, how scalable that possibility is. Because, we all talk about growth. We all understand Indian economy is all about growth. Indian stock markets respect the most where there is growth. But growth is only possible if there's a very large opportunity size in the business that you are in. So that is something that we are always focused on. What's the size of the business that is possible? What's the industry size? And also industry structure. Because if the industry is too fragmented, it becomes sometimes difficult for somebody to gain a decent market share. Or if there's a large unorganized market, what is the possibility of that unorganized market moving to organized market? Or there are a few industries where there are already 2, 3, 4 players where the consolidation has already happened. So trying to understand that is also very important, because finally profitability is dependent on your industry structure. So these are something that we are very much focused about. The other very important thing is to look at the inherent profitability. We all understand ROC and ROE is very important. How much we have invested, how much we are getting in return, higher the better. But the way I look at it is that actually this is fuel for growth. We all want high growth. Now, high growth is possible if you have invested higher amounts. If you want to invest higher amounts or reinvest your higher amounts, you need to generate higher amount of cash flow from your existing business. So high ROC and high ROE is actually your fuel for growth. So this is also something that we are very much focused about. Management quality, we just spoke about our model equal risk, where we talked about the management integrity. But, we have seen that managements don't only have to be honest, but they also need to have the big vision. They also need to have the big picture. We have seen so many times where managements are honest, but they are not capable, or they do not have the big picture or the big vision. Like, for example, if you go back to the heydays of 2000, there were at least 50, 60 listed IT companies and maybe few hundred unlisted IT companies. But after 20 years, there are less than probably 5, 6, 7 or under 10 companies which are in that $1 billion plus profit pool. right? The TCS is probably $4 billion plus, Infosys is $3 billion plus, then other companies will be $1 billion, $2 billion plus dollar profits, right? So it is only these few companies who could see this big picture of outsourcing happening to offshoring, and that is where they actually laid out a strategy. They have always had the clear integrity, not only towards their shareholders, but towards all their stakeholders, be it their customers, be it their vendors, be it their employees, be it their associates. So that is where it allowed them to have the execution to the T and grow the businesses to these global sizes, right? So that has been very, very important for us. Then of course the valuation, everything is good at a price and a bad at a price. And that is where I was just mentioning earlier also that we will also talk about a few examples where we have been exiting businesses just because we felt that the stock prices are now fully priced or maybe running ahead of time. So it's also very important. But, as I mentioned that the most important thing is at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the management and the purchase price. The other, say for example, the top three are more like actually science. Management quality is a combination of art and science to my mind. And of course, valuation is totally art, right? So that is something what we are very much focused about. The other very important thing is that, when we are investing with 3 years, 5 years horizons, it's also important to figure out where is the tailwind in the businesses. Some of the businesses, they have all of this construct, but then there is not great tailwind. For the returns to have, for the companies to deliver high growth and eventually stock prices to deliver high returns, we have realized and we have learned over the last few years that it's also important to figure out where is the tailwind in the businesses, right? So,
Yeah. If we have obviously highlighted our framework in the previous slide, but obviously it has to, sort of show up in the numbers. Like, in case of Equal, we do give, management marks and quantify the quality of the management, in a subjective way. Why not look at our own portfolio in that subjective way by looking at, hardcore numbers over here. So if you look at left-hand side top chart, ROC of all our companies, which we are going to discuss about. If you look at FY21, which was actually a pandemic period and, one of the worst, period for businesses in probably last, probably even 100 years, most of our companies delivered ROCs which are better than FY16 to 21 average. Which is to say that, in the last, year of this period, they actually delivered better returns on the capital employed than, probably even previous years. That shows the strength of the, businesses as such. If you look at, the bottom of this whole chart is just about 20%. So everything that we own in our business, barring probably Nesco, which has been, the worst hit in terms of exhibition business because of the COVID, our portfolio is, 20% is sort of a threshold, mark over there. One of the things which, Sachin also highlighted, and like I also said in the earlier, remarks, for us, revenue is vanity, profits are, sanity, but cash is, the king of the business. Again, here, if you look at right-hand side top chart, where we have seen, where we have shown operating cash flows to EBITDA ratio, which is the cash conversion ratio in a very common parlance. Almost 60% of the profits that they generate in terms of EBITDA gets converted into hard real cash. Now this operating cash flow is actually after tax. So, in case of EBITDA, which is gross of tax, our OCF is actually post-tax, which is about 25% on an average maximum marginal tax rate. On the left-hand side bottom chart, what we have also shown is that how our companies have grown in terms of profitability over last about 5 years. And, again, please bear in mind that FY21 is a pandemic year. And a lot of companies like, probably in the broader market, some of our companies would have also seen challenges. But despite those challenges, again, year threshold mark is about 16% barring one, which is Sundaram Fasteners. And Nesco, just a, caveat over there. For Nesco, we have taken a number which is FY15 to FY20, because in FY21, that exhibition park that they have in Goregaon in Mumbai was shut because of COVID, and which has been there for, a lot of other businesses which are into, mass gathering kind of business. But if you look at even prior to that, for 5-year period, we had 20 or 22% CAGR in terms of Nesco also. one of the key things which also Sachin spoke about in the previous slide is that high ROCs are okay. Conversion to cash is also okay. But is the company reinvesting that money in its own future and to generate compounded annual growth rate for its own shareholders or not? Again, here if you look at most of our companies, they have been investing minimum 40% of their EBITDA their operating cash flow in their own business. Obviously, from that operating cash flow, there will be a a dividend which will also be paid. I think with a fair confidence, I can say that most of these companies which we have highlighted here would have paid out dividends also in last 5 years. Throughout, including the COVID period also. So to put that pyramid in perspective of numbers, hardcore numbers. I just want to highlight here is that we do stick to our, that philosophy to the core, and anything which does not fit into, those parameters, will seek, a very stringent evaluation if it was to make a cut in our portfolio.
Sure. Yeah. So clearly backed up with very hardcore data and, financials is what we are trying to drive over here. We will now talk about some of the investment themes that we've invested in the last few years and why did we stick to them? Why did we hold them? Why do we even today continue to own them? I mentioned earlier that we've been owning Divi's Lab for more than 7 years. And from Divi's, we actually also identified companies like Laurus Labs and Suven Pharma. But, the important thing is if you look at the business, if you look at the industry outlook, so the most important thing is that the CDMO, the CRAM space is looking very solid. And some of the numbers are like, for example, in India, it's nearly probably say, let's look at the global thing. Let's look at that canvas. So globally, CDMO is more than probably $100 billion kind of an industry. China has about 30% market share, which is about say, $30 billion dollars. India has about 10% market share, which is about say $10 billion. If I look at the pharma R&D spend is probably growing at in the range of about 3 to 4%. If I look at the global CDMO spend or the way they are investing over there, it's probably growing at about 7 to 8%. And if I look at the way Indian CDMO market is growing, it's growing in probably low double digits, maybe in the range of 11, 12, 13%. So clearly, this is one space where India is gaining market share. Companies who have been in this business, who have earned their confidence from their customers, from their global customers, because mind you, these are all large global pharma companies who are the customers for companies like Divi's, Suven and Laurus. So, there's a lot of IP involved here, and they have to make sure that they earn the trust and the confidence of their customers, which has its own gestation period. Our sense is that in the last 5, 7, 10 years, these companies have not only earned the trust of their customers, but they have also delivered. They have also demonstrated that they have very high chemistry skills. They can scale up the businesses in the most efficient way. And that is where these businesses have actually grown stronger and stronger every year. In fact, it's not funny that Laurus Labs, which used to be probably less than 300 crore kind of a profit about just 3 years back, delivered 1,000 crore of profit in the year March 21, in the year ending March 21. Now that's a very large number to my mind. And the important thing is that probably they will double this profit in the less than next 3 years. That is the sense that we are getting. When we met the management of the Laurus Labs about 3 years back, the amount of capex that they had did, like the Kashyap mentioned about the capex part. So they had already invested close to 700, 800 crore plus of capex, and they were just about waiting to sweat those assets. And in the last 18 months, they have sweated their assets like nobody's business. And that is what has delivered rupees 1,000 crore plus profit. Similarly with Suven Pharma, it's a very, very high margin profit company. They have close to 40% as their EBITDA margins. And DVs, I'm sure most of you know, it's also more than 40% plus. DVs delivered rupees 2,000 crore plus profit. Again, the outlook on that business is very, very strong. So we strongly believe that each of these businesses have a very, very strong potential in terms of the industry tailwind, in terms of their pedigree of the management, in terms of the inherent profitability of this inherent profitability of each of these businesses, and of course the management have the right. Each of these companies' management not only have the integrity, but they also have the strategy and the execution in place. So that is something what has really attracted us, and that is why we are invested in these businesses for last many years now. We also spoke about Nesco. Now that's a very interesting thought process here. So if I go back to the heydays of 2006, 7, 8, where real estate was a very, very in thing, real estate investing was a very in thing, but a large part of the investing was happening in the domestic or in the residential real estate. And when we looked at some of those businesses, when we looked at some of those companies, the sense that we got is that they are actually just land bank gatherers or garnerers, those kind. They were almost behaving like the jagirdars, because they would all have, like, if you go and meet the management of any real estate company, you tell them that what is your plan. So he says, I have bought this land bank, I've got bought this land, next 20 years, 25 years, I'm fully secured, I'll keep on growing. But when will you execute? They didn't have a concrete plan, right? So that's when we said, can we look at another option where we look at the rental real estate yields? And that's when we identified a company called Nesco, which had this exhibition business as rental yields. And also they said, when we met the management, they very clearly said that whatever rental income they earn from the exhibition business, they will reinvest in the business to build the IT parks to generate even more rental income. So what used to be less than a 50 crore profit for Nesco 10 years back, today it's nearly a 500 crore kind of top line, assuming the exhibition business comes back to normalcy, and they will probably make 300 crores of plus net profit over a period of maybe next 12 to 18 months. So, the other very important confidence that gave us was that we saw that the large PE investors or the global sovereign funds also were investing in this real estate, commercial real estate, in a big way. In fact, each of them invested nearly $2 billion, or maybe by now actually $3-4 billion. And these deals keep on happening on a very regular basis. I'm sure all of you read the newspapers, and where they, like, even a very recent deal of Phoenix Mills was, where quite a few large private equity players have invested over there. One of the very another realizations that we had was that the foreign funds are actually investing in there when they were getting yields of nearly 8-9%. The rental yields are close to 8-9%. And they realize that the interest rates will keep on going down and down and down over the next few years. And that is where the value of their assets will keep on increasing, because they have locked in themselves at 8 to 9% rental yields when the interest rates were maybe 4 or 5% globally. And now the interest rates have dropped probably to 1% or so, which is where they have made a very large, they actually made a killing over there. So that has been a very interesting investment for us. The other very interesting business that I just spoke about was Tata Elxsi. So, when we looked at IT services as a space, we realized that probably IT services, in typical IT services, India has already gained a decent market share in the outsourcing business. Probably India has nearly 50% market share over the last 20 years. I just spoke about Infosys, TCS, how all of them have capitalized and have become, global size businesses. So today, Indian IT services actually has nearly 50% market share in the IT services outsourcing market. But when we looked at IT embedded services or IT engineering R&D space, so that space, first of all, the outsourcing itself is very small as compared to the IT services. The outsourcing over there is just about in single digits, maybe 9% or so. And within that, again, India's market share, the offshoring part, is probably, under 13-14%. So that is where we saw a very large opportunity. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we saw the change in consumer trends, and we realized that the spending in this space will definitely increase. Once the spending increases, the outsourcing and the offshoring will play its role. And that is where companies like Tata Elxsi have played a very, very important role because they have been focused in each of these three segments: auto, media, and healthcare. Auto, we all understand how the connected cars, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, even our existing cars, the entire dashboards have become much more digital. That is what is really helping them. Media, I think COVID has played a big role in terms of accelerating the delivery of OTT platforms, or the way they have actually, I would say, exploded across. None of us had any other choice but to be at the OTT platforms, whether it is Netflix, Amazon's, or all of them. So that has also really helped companies like Tata Elxsi a lot. And I think the future growth will be healthcare, which is the medical devices. That is where, again, most of that is getting digital, and even on the remote basis, that is where companies like Tata Elxsi will have more and more work, because a lot of spending is going to go there. So this is a very, very big opportunity, and which is where we had identified this company almost 2 years back, which is when the valuations were very reasonable. The company we expected them to do a profit of close to about, anywhere in the range of 250 to 300 odd crores in the March 21. And the market cap of that company was in the range of probably 6 to 8,000 crores. That's when we invested. But, interesting thing is, yes, they did deliver a 300 crore PAT their profit for March 21 in that range. But the markets have reacted much more positive than what even we were anticipating. And as you all know, the stock price has probably gone nearly 4 times, or maybe 4.5 times now in the last less than 2 years. So the market cap of this company today is about 27,000 crores. Now, when we do some of our numbers internally, what they have delivered a profit of close to about 300 crores. Even if you just think the best case scenario over the next 2 years, probably they would deliver about 600 crores of profits, right? So even with 600 crores of profit, the stock is already trading at probably 40 times 2 year forward. More than 40 times, because 40 times will make it 24,000. The market cap today is already 27,000. So it's probably trading at closer to maybe 45 times. Now, that really makes us think that is the stock price running too much ahead of time? The business opportunity is great. There is no doubt about it. But in terms of valuations, is the market also giving us an opportunity on the other side? See, about 2 years back, it gave us an opportunity to invest. But today, is the market giving us an opportunity to actually book profits? So that is how we also approach things in terms of selling our or exiting our investments. And Tata Elxsi is something where we strongly believe that these valuations are probably running ahead of time, and it probably makes sense to book profits at this point in time. Yeah, Kashyap.
In terms of consumer preferences, we also spoke about how an average young consumer, wants to spend, more and more money to get quality healthcare for his own family. In fact, if nothing else, then COVID-19 is actually pronounced, that paucity of great healthcare, in our country. It's about, if you look at global averages, in India, we have only about 12 beds per 10,000, odd population, whereas global average is almost more than about, rather almost 2.5x of, what we have here. In fact, COVID-19 has exposed even global healthcare at that kind of averages, to the onslaught which came in later. So clearly, not only in India, globally, everywhere, there is going to be significant spending which will happen on healthcare. In fact, in India today, the market stands at almost about 4 lakh crores, and which is expected to grow at about 15%. And as we go forward, the consumer is definitely going to spend a lot of money on quality and branded, healthcare, rather than going to probably a nearby nursing home or a standalone hospital, which is there, and also what people are going to also look at is that, they probably would, prefer healthcare where you have multi-specialty, treatments available, which would include all cardiac, diabetes, oncology, or even for that matter, the laboratory part of it, wherever you have that combined, offering available, along with ability to use a great health insurance, to save yourself from, spending a lot of money out of your own pocket. And where we thought, Narayan Hrudayalaya clearly fits the bill, because, it's creating an asset light model, which will, which is helping them to scale up and capitalize on the market opportunity pretty fast. And the fact that, it's a chain which is expanding more into tier 1 and tier 2 town, where the cost of setting up a hospital is lower, but the realizations may not necessarily be very different versus what you get in metro cities. So for probably a cardiac operation in Mumbai will cost you anywhere between about 4 to 7 lakhs. If you go to tier 1 and 2 towns, the cost is not going to be materially different for, them also. But clearly, when you migrate to, the tier 2 and tier 3 towns of the country, the capital cost continues to, get lighter and lighter. And which is where, our philosophy of generating even ROCs from asset heavy businesses and conversion of cash flows that to reinvest in newer hospitals, clearly come into play. As of today, the company is generating and did generate an EBIT of about 200 crores, even in a COVID period, which is a sharp decline over what they did in FY20, almost half of it, because, for most of the, part, the hospital was closed for, elective procedures. But we do believe that, when these lockdowns are open and elective surgeries come back into play, and the kind of money that the company has invested in newer hospitals, including their expansion outside this country, that 200 crore EBITDA number could clearly, catapult to almost about, 2.5 to 3x of that number. And, definitely we would look to ride, on that growth. Again, here, purchase price discipline on a different way also comes into play, that obviously when these lockdowns happen and the hospitals were closed for elective surgery, the stock price of Narayan Hrudayalaya clearly saw very sharp decline. But given our conviction in the asset light model, the ROCs of the business and ability of the management to reinvest in its own businesses, we actually took more position when the stock price was, was declining. So like, Sachin said that on whenever we feel that valuations have far outpaced the growth that we are anticipating in the company, we definitely look at, exit in a rule-based manner. On the other side, if our conviction is permitting us, we do not even shy away from taking positions when, probably the stock price is like a falling knife. We don't even mind taking positions even at that point of time. On the consumer preferences, one of the stock ideas clearly which clicked over here is Navin Fluorine. Again, here, if you look at global, specialty chemicals market, a lot of other, molecules, or let's say other chemicals, because of their either environmental problem or lower efficiency, are making way for fluorine. If you look at today, in the pharmaceutical market, 3 out of every 10 blockbuster drugs actually contain fluorine. And why fluorine? Because fluorine actually accelerates a lot of, the effect that you want to see in a particular drug, where, let's say, for example, if a particular drug you need to take, let's say 50 mg, I'm just giving you an example right now, not necessarily with respect to Navin Fluorine, but let's say a 50 mg tablet is required to, keep your blood pressure under check. Using a fluorination helps you to achieve the same effect with probably a 40 mg or 30 mg tablet, and which is clearly, putting a lot of efficiency in the final product in terms of molecule. The similar thing is happening on the agrochem side, where the pests, or the insects are clearly they are clearly exhibiting a lot of resistance to the chlorine based compounds which are used in pesticides and insecticides and herbicides. And clearly fluorination is actually replacing a lot of chlorination chemistry in these agrochemicals. So if you look at today, 70% of the agrochemical molecules which are developed recently are all fluorinated, which is where we saw a lot of opportunity. If you put these two opportunities combined, the global fluorination market is a size of about $21.5 billion. And if you look at size of India in that fluorination market as a percentage, share that we have, again, is in very small single digit number. And clearly, this is also fitting into China Plus One strategy is that, global agrochemical as well as pharmaceutical measures are, looking at where, clearly Navin Fluorine does make a cut. What also happened alongside what we saw here is that there was a change in management. There was reorganization of corporate structure, which became really capex focused. So they started investing. The cash flow was never an issue, but you have to reinvest those cash flows to generate future profitability also. And clearly we saw that happening over last about 3-year period where 40% of the operating cash flows were being reinvested in the business for future growth. And even this year it has just accelerated even more. Recently, they signed up to long-term contracts also into high performance polymers, which are into fluorination space. And then, again, that adds to the overall earnings. Again, to highlight what Sachin highlighted in case of Tata Elxsi, again, here we see a lot of opportunities in terms of fluorinated space over, let's say, longer term period. But in a short span of time, the stock has run up from as low as about, probably about 900 to about 3,900 now. And what we clearly see is that, in terms of valuations, if I'm looking at valuations which are about 28 to 30 times EV/EBITDA, something which is very expensive. And we have taken a conscious call that, we would look at, probably having this back in our portfolio at, a reasonable price. And the valuations are actually fitting the kind of growth or when they are clearly doing the justice to, clearly a very strong growth that we see in this space. I also mentioned about, how some of the screeners, are like, serendipity. They just, some of these things, tumble out of, those kind of screeners, just like that. So, clearly we saw that, the LPG, which is liquid petroleum, liquefied petroleum gas, is one of the clearest fuel for energy. And India's LPG imports are likely to grow at a CAGR of about 6% over next about 15-year period. If you look at on the chemical side, I already highlighted in the previous slide about Navin Fluorine, that in terms of specialty chemicals, definitely India is going to be a global hub in China Plus One strategy, and also on our own where we have, developed a lot of strength in the chemistry knowledge. One of the screeners that we usually run is that, how much are businesses reinvesting, their cash flows into their own business. Aegis Logistics clearly over last about 4-year period between FY 14 to 18 invested almost about 800 crores, which is 4x its own EBITDA in FY 17, and which was equivalent to its 5 years total cash flows. They invested everything into LPG storage and chemical storage business. All this cash which was invested, which is almost about 800 crores, were internally generated. If you look at actually market cap of Aegis at that point of time, this capex would be almost 50% of their market cap also at that point of time. Throughout all these years, when they invested 800 crores into the business, they paid out dividends in each of this business. So obviously, this capex was not at the expense of distributing cash back to the shareholders also. And, we were just waiting for right time for this utilization or sweating of these assets to happen. And if you look at between FY 17 to 20, the EBITDA actually has grown at about 2.5x, which is almost a CAGR of almost about 24 to 25 odd %, over the 4-year period. So, obviously we looked at, the fact that the company was investing heavily into its own business, and it was just waiting game that, when this capex will get sweated out. And moment it got sweated out, the profitability started to grow in a very high double-digit number for this particular company.
Yeah, Kashyap, would you also like to highlight the recent event in Aegis?
Yes, sure. Sorry, I forgot that. And again here, our discipline in terms of not only getting into the company, but getting out of a profitable investments, despite the fact that it has done wonders for us. At the current price of about 360 to 390, this was definitely hitting the upper band of the valuation comforts that we had. Alongside what also happened is that recently company has announced some corporate restructuring where they are transferring some of their growth business into a joint venture. Not that we don't like the deal, but the deal is at a price which is at discount to the current market valuations. And the fact that current market valuations are very much near to the upper band that we were comfortable, ascribing to this particular business, keeping the growth in mind. we actually didn't mind exiting the business also because, the price was not justifying the growth. That's part one. And two, the corporate event which recently occurred, what was not, up to our own expectations, though, the deal definitely brings in a great foreign partner for the company also. And we didn't shy away from exiting the investment, which has done actually really worked really well for us.
Right. Yeah.
Can we move to the
Some of
Q&A?
the
Sure.
I think
please
this is the
continue.
last slide actually on the
Please, Mr.
on the
Keshav.
idea side. Sure. Some of the other things that we also looked at is that, whether our companies have a fairly large global market and which have capabilities to definitely delve into those global markets, and two ideas which we identified over there, Timken India and Mahindra CIE. The fact that both of them are highly profitable business, as are visible in their gross margins and operating profit numbers. And also they do provide us a lot of scalability because if you look at Timken India, almost 25% of their business comes from, exports, which, they have, a lot of supplies which are happening to Timken global companies, as well as, to a lot of, OEMs which are, connected with the Timken as a group. Similarly, if you look at Mahindra CIE, almost about 52% of their production actually is catering to the European markets. We definitely do believe that, in auto ancillary per se, these global markets can provide a fairly large market opportunities to, some of the businesses that we own. I think in interest of time, we can actually move to Q&A, and there is the market outlook which is pending. We can take it up as a part of Q&A if anybody has a question over there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah, it's
Thanks,
wonderful
Kashyap.
that it is a ongoing process, that it is going to be done as a series. The first series has gone very well. We'll move into the Q&A. Before moving into the Q&A, your proprietary model is working because it has delivered in excess of 125% for all the three series which you launched earlier. Is a very clear indication that something we are doing is correct. Okay, and going into the Q&A, I got a question. What kind of importance you give for the aging management or the bench strength of the management? Because most of the companies in India are individual driven, it is not board driven. What kind of importance you give, as a lot of importance you give for the management? All the outcome is emits out of the management. What kind of importance you give for the aging management and the bench strength?
Yeah, Mr. Shivaram, I think that's a fantastic question. And that definitely is at the top of our mind. And, after making the initial investment and after investment being successful, in the sense that after the management delivers it, the next few meetings that I do with the management, I am only focused on that part, that how is the transition going to happen over a period of next 5-10 years? Because most of the times when we are investing, the key managerial person or the key promoter is typically in the range of maybe 45 to 65. That's the typical range that we see. So the promoters who are in that range of maybe 55, 60, 65, 70, we are very, very always trying to figure out the management bandwidth, and also how much professionalized, how much institutionalized are they actually making the entire company into. But we have to also understand that there are certain businesses which will have certain entrepreneurial skills, and it is up to those entrepreneurs how they actually cultivate, culture the entire the management bandwidth within the company. So it is very critical. So we pay a very, very, we are very, very focused on that. But at the same time, we don't try to preempt and say, oh, he's the only guy, and then what after him? And we miss the entire opportunity. So we would like to ride the rally. We would like to ride the growth of the business along with the performer, keeping our eyes wide open seeing that where is the transition happening, how is it happening, and is it going to be as good or better than what it has been all these years. So it's a process. As we evolve, we keep our eyes open too. We are eyes wide open, I would say.
See, this is a specific question on the two stocks which you spoke extensively. And people ask, aging management is the problem with Divi's. And when it comes to Laurus, it is a B2G business. What is your outlook on this?
So first is among the DVs. So Dr. Murli Divi, I completely agree with what you are saying. But we have to understand that both his kids, Mr. Kiran Divi and also his daughter, both of them have been in the business. They are being, I would say, very well groomed inside the business. Whatever understanding that we have, Kiran Divi is very much focused in terms of the chemistry skills and understanding of how to take the business forward. We have to also understand that along with Dr. Murli Divi, there is one more partner who has been with him since inception. So he's also there. So at this point in time, we are not overly worried. But as I mentioned, that we have our eyes wide open and how the transition will happen. Because even now, Dr. Divi still has at least, to my mind, at least 10 more years, barring unforeseen circumstances. We have to also understand very important thing. A large part of the team of Dr. Divi's has been with him since inception of Divi's, so more than 25 years. If you talk to any of the HR consultants, they will tell you that it's very difficult to pull people out of Divi's lab and place them in some other companies. So that's again a very important point that we should understand, that the way he has cultivated the entire culture, the way he has groomed the entire team, that they all stay with him, also plays a very important role in terms of business continuity.
On Laurus, can you throw some light? Is it more concentrated on B2G, that is business to government?
Right. So that's a reality to some extent, but that the management is very conscious about, and the entire incremental growth that you will see will be from the non-government business. So if that was say 70%, say 3 years back, today it would be significantly lower. And our senses in terms of if you see the con calls that in the earning con calls, the way the management is guiding, because they are getting into the formulation sides of the business, they are getting into the developed markets from the compared to the LMIC markets that they are currently present in, because the LMIC market, the large part of the sourcing happens through the it is not exactly government also, because a lot of this funding is through a lot of the other funds, which is not exactly government sponsored. But I will say that you are not completely wrong. But I'm pretty sure, I'm very confident that the management is de-risking themselves from this business model, and you will see the results in less than 3 years from here on.
Good, great. And at the category level, people want to understand, some investors are saying, when an investment opportunity just the fund compared to a PMS manager.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, again, it's a question relevant to across the spectrum, right? Like you can say, why 50 lakhs in PMS versus 5,000 rupees in a mutual fund, right? So mutual fund, PMS, AIF, these are all platforms, and these are all underlying is actually equities. But we have to be very clear that, when we talk about AIF, they have very clear mandates in terms of the time frame, in terms of where they are going to invest, what kind of risk appetite that the investor has. So, those are the differentiating factors. Like, for example, in AIF, we will also have an option of drawdown, right? Like in PMS, you have to invest the entire minimum 50 lakhs at one go. Whereas in AIF, the commitment will be rupees 1 crore, but we could have a differentiating factor in terms of drawdown. Like, for example, there are options in terms of investing entire 1 crore at one go. You could have it in 3 options, 30, 30, 40, or you could also have 10 by 10. You could just invest 10 lakhs at one go and then in another 10 installments over the next 1 year or so. So, those options are also there in AIF. I think a lot of AIF schemes are also packaged more like private equity investing, where they are more like a close-ended fund. And over a fixed period, that this money will be returned to me with whatever appreciation that is expected. So it's a plus. The other very important thing that I would like to say is that we spoke about the skin in the game, right, from the promoter management quality side. In the AIF also, the sponsor has to have at least 5% of the total fund collected, or rupees 10 crore as per the SEBI rules, as an investment. So that's another additional thing. There is a skin in the game from the manager side or the sponsor side. That is also very important criteria. So the entire AIF structure is more built like a private equity investing, where there's a limit, there's a tenure. And then there is also the skin in the game from the sponsor side, and there's a very specific mandate. Depending on the risk appetite, the investor should evaluate it.
Can we take a couple of more questions before closing?
Sure.
And you have spoken all about your success stories. And can you highlight where your expectations has not met the actual delivery and you have failed and you have exited? Can you give some example is what someone wants to know?
Sure. So there have been a couple of examples that I can think of. Kashyap, you can also add. So one of the companies is we had invested in a business which manufactures the generator sets for captive power plants. Okay, this was a company which we invested almost 4 or 5 years back. But for some reason, the company could not deliver because of external challenges, because of internal challenges, and also because of our mistake in terms of the valuations. So, that was one company where we realized that it's very important to have the tailwinds in the business. So the construct of the business was there. They had more than probably 60-70% market share in their particular segment. But because the generator that they supply is for the captive power plants. Now, unfortunately, what happened in the last 5 years, we all know that the capex cycle has just not revived in India, right? Now, because of that, the company did not get enough orders. The company had to maneuver themselves to go to the export side of the business. Now, trying to get onto the export side is a very good idea, but it has its own long gestation period. So over the 3, 4, 5 years, the company could not deliver the profits that we were estimating. And because of that, the stock price also have been beaten down quite badly. And we had to make a conscious decision that even for at least next 2-3 years, we don't see things turning around. So we exited the business. Kashyap, would you like to add any more examples?
He is in mute.
On the exogenous side, there was I can recall one, which is Inox Leisure, where we definitely we did believe that consumer preferences, again, like what we saw in case of Narayana Hrudayalaya, people are ready to spend more on quality entertainment. A great cushion seats, or probably popcorns and the beverages and all. The company was doing phenomenally well. Unfortunately, the COVID happened, and what we thought is that this particular business, despite inherent strength of its own, maybe exogenous factors will not let it ride back in very immediate future. It will take a slightly longer period of time to get people back to the theaters, to get back to watch movies, and exit that we made about let's say about 12 to 14 months ago, about 14 months ago. But like I said, it was more to do with exogenous factors rather than endogenous factor of its own at that point of time.
The earlier 3 series you have launched has delivered about 127% in the first series. Second series again has repeated 127% in last 1 year. third also has made 123%. And someone wants to know this kind of performance can be repeated. Yeah, obviously you will not be able to answer directly. And can you throw some light?
Yeah. So let me first clarify that these returns are also because we saw a bad March 2020. So it's on the base of that. If you see March 2020, all the portfolios were down more than 30% in that one single month. This is the case across the world. Every global equity market, including India, were down 30%. So obviously all the portfolios would also be down by 30%. And that is on that base you are seeing such a high return. I think the right way to look at it is that we have probably delivered closer to about 15 to 20% compounded return over the last 3 years since the inception of our AIF, which is MK Emerging Stars Fund, Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. We have delivered the compounded returns in the range of about 15 to 20%. So in that sense, the 125% return is a bit of an optical illusion, I would say, because it's to do with the depressed base. But the right way to look at it is that over the last 3 years, we've delivered a compounded return in the range of about 15 to 20% versus the benchmark small caps index returns of low single digits in the range of about 4 to 5%. So we've had a very decent outperformance. So our total returns are actually upwards of 60% over the last 3 years, whereas the benchmark returns are only in the range of about 30%. So we have delivered twice the return of the benchmarks. That would be the right perspective to look at. We believe that our processes, our systems, and our research will really help us to continue this kind of performances, is what we strongly believe.
You have
and also to take credit where it's due. Sorry to interject.
Sorry. Please go ahead. Please.
Our AIF 1, 2, and 3 series, or rather not 2 and 3, but AIF 1 series was actually launched when the mid cap were in there, the best of the health in terms of stock prices, which was January 2018. So returns that Sachin is talking about since inception are with a base which is also one of the favorable bases for small caps in terms of stock price. And this 15 to 20% return is delivered on that base, which is also worth highlighting over here.
Sure.
Fantastic. And any which way, if we see, you have beaten the index handsomely is very clearly coming out because your proprietary model is working very well. Any journey which has started well is it is going to be a journey as this AIF series is going to continue with MK. I would like to thank the participants and Mr. Sachin and Mr. Keshav for your time and patiently answering for all the viewers' question. If any question which has not been answered in this forum, I'm sure we will send it to you and we will reply to be sent to the individual participants.
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Shivaram. Thank you everyone for being with us. Really appreciate. Thank you.